Welcome to That Japanese Thing. Today we're going to be talking about Cyberpunk Edgerunners, the new anime from Trigger. But before that, some Japanese news. My name is Christopher and my co-hosts are Dylan and Yesh. Welcome guys, how are you doing today?
Hey,
Hello.
Excellent. The responses as expected. It's been a week, at least for me, and I think for everyone else as well. So yeah, we talked a bit about that before the podcast. But here's some Japanese news. North Korea fires a long-range missile into the Japanese economic zone, which is... I just believe it's the Japanese territorial... Well, not territorial waters, but the waters which have fishing rights, essentially, around Japan. And I think everyone knows now that North Korea does in fact have probably functional nuclear missiles. So that is what everyone's worrying about here. Now the thing about this that is a bit depressing is that no one is doing anything about it as far as I can really ascertain from anything, right? So especially not the Japanese, who the Prime Minister Kishida said it's outrageous and he strongly protests it. Okay, that's great. That's not going to stop anyone. The US did scramble some warships, so I mean that's a thing. I don't know if that's going to stop anyone, and I always wonder if it's whenever North Korea launches a nuclear missile, sort of like platform missile, into the Sea of Japan. If it isn't just someone, playing geopolitics between America and China, China's sort of just prodding North Korea to do something outrageous, and they're using Japan and North Korea as like pawns in that sort of situation.
Chris, what good is a clock if it doesn't start getting close to 12 o'clock every now and then?
Oh, the doomsday clock, I believe Dylan is talking about. We are currently, I believe, 17 seconds from midnight, which is nuclear Armageddon. It's not a great situation for the world. I don't think anyone would destroy the world over North Korea, though. Let's be honest.
That's the scary part of this story, is that it's like a nation that's not well acquainted with mutually assured destruction as a fundamental element of its diplomacy.
Yeah, but even if North Korea nuked like an island in Japan or something like that, I don't think Russia and China and America would be willing to end the world over that situation. I'm pretty sure they've had conversations about that, behind closed doors.
I think the concern is that it's very difficult to actually know, or at least it's more difficult than we think it is to know.
Well, one thing we do know about the situation, right?
What extent the scale is, etc.
Oh, I mean, I'm sure it's a chicken, chickens. I don't want to swear on this. It's a really low quality kind of thing that they're doing over there in North Korea. Yeah. I think it's probably equivalent and probably worse than say like a Pakistan sort of nuclear situation. Maybe equivalent to what South Africa had back in the 80s, which is to say they're nuclear weapons and they would like devastate a city center or something, but they probably wouldn't, ignite the atmosphere around the area or anything like that. So I think, it's a very serious situation, but it's not a global world-ending thing, and I think things could be done to just sort of pressure the situation into stopping. But it's probably too sensitive to broach that topic between especially Japan, China, and America, who have historical baggage around getting along, unfortunately. More so China and America at this point than Japan and China, I would say. Although obviously the tensions in the past would have been more towards Japan, having occupied China for a while. What do you think? Is the world ending, Ish?
No, I don't think anything in this universe is that merciful. So no, I just don't think so.
Indeed. See, I think if the world were going to end in a nuclear fashion, it would probably have something to do with either India or Russia. That's my guess on the nuke front of things.
Yeah, I reserve some concern knowing how these things work. Once certain launches are detected, you have limited information about them. You know something has happened, but you don't know to what extent, scale, or who it is, given the fact that these things can be launched from submarines, for example.
Yes,
And
the,
so,
the 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 saving grace there, Dylan, is that North Korea does not have the entire economy of North Korea could not build a single nuclear submarine.
for sure, what I'm getting at here is the only way to play nuclear warfare like with any hope that you have some salvaging, if you're the US, for example,
Yeah,
is trying to be as accurate as you can. But if you're going to pull the trigger, you pull the trigger hard and you escalate pretty much to the maximum as fast as you can.
Kill
Because
everyone twice.
because
Yeah.
the more you knew, the whole theory surrounding this, and this has just been demonstrated in every single experiment that they've run, or theoretical experiment that they've run, is that the faster you nuke the other team, the more extensively you nuke the other team, the less you get nuked in the beginning. And so it becomes like a bang-bang control situation. You don't have an escalation of force. You have non-nuclear warfare. And the minute that it's even a remote possibility that a nuke's been launched by one of the main players, right? And I know we're talking about North Korea now. My question is, how do you know exactly that it was North Korea when Russia could be parking a sub right there and doing the same thing? So this is now the worry. It's not a guarantee that other people would sit and say, okay, well, what's the likelihood this is what we think this is, versus if we're wrong and we don't pull the trigger right now, our entire nation goes down.
I
That's
I
what
understand that. I think maybe I give too much credit to say the U.S. armed forces, but they are a very professional
Yeah,
army, and I
Yeah.
think they probably know what the Russians are doing. Is my opinion, at least with regards to nuclear submarine positions and such things.
oh sure. I mean, the DoD recently has been very vocal about what the president's been saying and correcting him, because in this case, it really does matter.
Yeah,
Yeah, No,
and
you're right.
I think in those sort of situations, I mean, America might be crazy in certain ways, but I think it probably has the most professional and well-run military on the planet, and
Sure.
I think people should put some faith into that. And that brings me to the second story, and I'm sorry to have such maybe downers as stories, but all of the anime-related news is just that shows are launching, and that's not really news per se. It's something that'll show up on your anime streaming service feed at some point. Some of them seem quite good. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about that.
This season
But-
is quite stacked in some regards.
But before that, Japan is making new armored vehicles. So I think Japan and Germany are in the same position at the moment, right? In that they were rightly so demilitarized after what they did in World War II. And as a result, they've been able to get away with not spending enough money on their military hardware over the last, almost 70 years at this point, maybe more than 70 years, really. So now both of them are having to develop new hardware, and in this case, Japan is making a common platform for armored vehicles, which basically means they're bringing everything up to a modern standard so it can be used. When they say common platform, they usually mean so that it is compatible with another military's hardware. In this case, it would be with the US.
Mhm.
Australia has just done the same thing. Of course, Australia had a normal military, so it wasn't such a big deal. But you'll remember that situation a few months ago, maybe even a year ago, where Australia suddenly stopped buying French
French
equipment,
submarines.
French
Yeah.
submarines in particular, and switched to
To
UK, well, UK submarines.
UK submarines, but funded by the US.
But British and American submarines are basically the same thing with a different stamp on them. When it sort of comes down to, I mean, I understand military people that it's not exactly the same thing, but they do basically the same thing. In fact, the UK just made two new aircraft carriers which are compatible with American planes and such. So the Australians are doing the same thing, and now Japan is doing this to their armored vehicles. And I think Japan's navy is already in that situation because it's the one thing they didn't underfund. Because no one wants to be invaded by China, basically. But yeah, this is it's a concerning development, but it's probably something that frankly should have been done maybe a decade ago, 2 decades ago, in fact.
I'm just disappointed it's not Mecha, goddammit.
There is some talk about armored personnel armor, and so we're not talking necessarily about your Full Metal Panic, Gundam style mecha, but we are talking about your Starship Troopers sort of mecha, and those are pretty awesome. People who are not familiar with the books won't know the full extent to how great those mobile suits are, but they're pretty much a tank in their own right. I believe the French and the Japanese are cooperating on one of those. The one thing I'll say is that the cool thing about it is it can take a high caliber anti-armor gunshot to the face.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because there's nothing actually on the face. There's no visor or anything like that. It's where the armor is thickest, in fact. Which is what you would probably do with like that sort of mobile suit. Because its function is just to protect the person inside.
Yeah.
Just to come back to some lighter news before inevitably we go down another dark hole. There are a few anime that have just come out, and one that I wasn't expecting to be any good is I'm raising the Demon Lord. I'm taming the Demon Lord. It's a villainous anime about a reincarnated Japanese person who knows they're in an Otama game, very much like the Katharina one. And it had the worst possible adverts for it. They just all look so generic, but it's actually fun. And I reckon probably people won't watch it because of how bad the advertising campaign was. But I think everyone should give that one a go. That's my one recommend for the season so far. And I'll pass to Dylan now.
Yeah. So the first piece of news that I've got for everyone is that a health ministry panel is making recommendations. I think we must be careful about what that means, but they're making recommendations that the government should at least consider legalizing some medicinal cannabis use. But in their recommendations, they're quite formal about it. They talk about drugs derived from cannabis, such as epilepsy drugs, etc.
Yeah.
Which is not a bad thing. I mean, if you're going to derive a pharmaceutical product from...
there are legitimate and real good uses for that sort of thing. That
100%.
Yeah. And particularly with people with mood swings and bipolar disorder and that sort of thing, it can be very, very useful to someone.
Yeah.
It's not just about getting high or anything. Sure. But if someone wants to get high, I don't really see why they shouldn't.
Oh yeah, I'm of the same mindset in terms of having autonomy over your body.
And Japan is the only country that has a sizable Rastafarian population that doesn't use cannabis.
Right.
It's
yeah. I mean, we were discussing before. To my knowledge, it's always been said that Japan doesn't make a sentencing discrimination between marijuana use and
harder drugs. Yeah.
Harder drugs if they catch you doing it. So it's just a thing. It's not a misdemeanor. You're going to be looking at.
So to just give perspective to people, because I think most people live in a country where it's basically legal to smoke some sort of marijuana, at least at home, right? That is the situation on the ground where we are, and I think that's true in most states in America and probably throughout Europe. But it's illegal for a Japanese citizen to go to one of those countries and smoke marijuana. That's how strict the laws are against it at this point. And by the way, it's illegal for you to ever have smoked marijuana as a non-Japanese citizen, and then to go to Japan on a visa. By the way, that is grounds for refusal for the visa.
Sure.
So bear that in mind in your application. I don't think anyone's checking this, right? But I would, if I was applying for some sort of position where someone is likely to check this, I might scour through some of my social media and just make sure that there's no evidence of some use.
And just make sure you talk about smoking oregano in all of your podcasts rather than smoking something as harsh as cannabis.
Yeah.
So,
cool. Yeah. Anything else?
There's quite a novel event occurring at the moment. The city of Koka is taking...
Lovely name.
Yeah, right. Of the Koga Ninja fame for all the Western ninja files. They're taking stock of anyone who wants to participate in their Shinobi Yoichi, their Evening of the Ninja. They are looking for 100 participants total, 50 of which shall be ninja, 50 of which shall be samurai. And they shall have a battle on the evening of the 22nd of October, I believe, when it's currently scheduled for. And the whole idea is that you'll have 50 ninja running up a hill trying to assassinate 50 samurai stationed around the fortress.
Dylan, you're a ninja file. Shinobi. Oh, were they originally just thieves or burglars? Is that where the name comes from?
This is a long conversation to get into.
Maybe for another date then. But
yeah, I mean, I'll leave you with this. There are a lot of people with a lot of differing opinions, and I will say that those opinions, in general, everyone's opinions, are partially informed by folktale. They're partially informed by contemporary media like film. Right? It's a very romanticized set. They're informed by the ways in which theater would be run back in the Edo period, where you would have stagehands dressed in black.
Can I tell you why I ask though?
Sure.
Because I've been reading the Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit in Japanese as just something to do, and so technically speaking, they refer to Bilbo as a shinobi, right? So
do they?
He is. He's he is.
What? Okay.
I mean, it's maybe just. I guess that's what he is. So Bilbo is a ninja if you're Japanese, basically. That's the gist we get from the story anyway. I think the books were probably translated in the 50s. Maybe they would have chosen a different way of doing that now.
Yeah, I mean the word for shinobi predominantly bears, at least in my circles, the significance of persevering or surviving, more than the modern connotation of concealing. If there's any concealing, it's within the context of survival, and this is just to keep this brief, not to go too deep into it. If you spend time in the bush or the wilderness, that is the essence of where the thing comes from. It's about being able to survive in a non-city setting, right? As I think the one of the more accurate depictions is in terms of the Togakure clan, and they were mostly known for being very good at guerrilla warfare, so small unit tactics kind of deal. Not as a masked smoke bomb wielding opponent necessarily, but more someone who could survive out in the wilderness and harass regular troops.
Yes.
And there's a lot of truth in that.
So I was just
Other aspects less so.
confirming, right? So I just went to the.
Uh,
You can see this on Wikipedia if you want. Go to the Japanese page, and then Bilbo says employed by the magic user. That's what they call wizards in Japanese, as a shinobi no mono, which just means and that means ninja basically, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Shinobi no Mono is the.
It's the gender neutral way of referring to a ninja, I would say.
It's the best way of thinking of that in a modern context is someone who engages in scaly shit.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Like dodgy stuff. And I always found it silly that people in a Western sense, this isn't Japanese people, Western people, thought that ninja were somehow an antagonistic clan towards samurai. And this is in the article that I'm reading, this is like hyped, right? But it makes no sense there would be one and the same. You might have people within a military context.
Yeah, your samurai would work for the feudal lord, and he would also have ninja working for him.
Yeah, and they could also be of the samurai class, depending on the era that they're in.
Yeah,
but yeah,
certainly could be true.
100%.
All right, but with that being said, Yesh, what do you have for us?
So my story is of less importance to the world per se, but I did find it a very Japanese or a display of Japanese culture sort of story. Some people from the Pokemon Company, subsidiary of Nintendo, have been speaking up recently with regards to how Nintendo of Japan and Pokemon Company in Japan view certain things. In particular, they have mentioned that they view a Nuzlocke run, which is a unique set of rules that have been applied to the Pokemon games to make them more fun for adults to play in particular. The Japanese side of the company views that as the equivalent of using ROM hacks. They have that's the wording they used. When company employees suggested that they would like to put up Nuzlocke runs on the official YouTube channel, there were talks of them being fired.
Whoa.
People have lost their Nintendo partnership and had their channels striked for having Nuzlocke runs. The advantage here is that the Japanese people don't watch... Not the Japanese people, sorry, my bad. The Japanese employees of the Pokemon Company and Nintendo don't tend to watch English YouTube, so they don't strike other people. But when someone who is partnered with specifically the Japanese side of the Pokemon Company, and when someone is part of the Nintendo Creator Program, tries to post a Nuzlocke run, it gets striked and they get their partnership removed.
I know it's not Nintendo per se, but it is sort of related to this. Dragon Ball Z Abridged by Team 4-Star is not available in Japan. You can't watch it. It's banned on Japanese YouTube. And there's no... They have a translation, a subtitle for every other language in the world at this point, except Japanese.
This comes out of the mindset in particular that property is owned by the company, and even if something is transformative, even if it would increase sales, they are against it. They are very negative. They don't give a damn about anything that even helps them. As long as it's not under their control, they will try and murder you for it.
Yes.
Please note murder being an excessive phrasing.
I think things are being done at the moment to try and stop some of this craziness. And you're right, it is crazy. And I think there's some talk in the government about just sort of relaxing some of these kind of insanities and kind of companies almost have some draconian kind of legal.
Have you heard about
such things?
The pushback against that pushback?
I'm sure. I'm sure it exists. My only point to anyone who is going to try and defend that pushback of the pushback is that Japan used to have 7 out of the 10 richest companies in the world.
Yeah.
And they don't even feature on that list anymore.
Yeah.
And it's because of this sort of craziness. I mean, Nuzlocks sell versions of Pokemon that
honestly, I would not have bought Black and White if it wasn't for Nuzlocke running.
I think if I wasn't watching the Team 4-Star streams like Nuzlocke, I would there would be versions of Pokemon I would have never even
Never bought.
entertained playing through. Yeah.
Oopsie daisy.
Okay.
I mean,
Anything else? Sorry, Dylan. Go on, please.
No.
Yeah,
No,
please,
it's
please.
fine. We can move on. That's
Okay.
cool.
Well, in that case, on to our last topic, unless there's anything else, Yash?
No, that's me.
Okie dokie. By the way, Japan is actually opening up in like another 2 months or so. It'll basically be open for tourism. It's not going to be what people think opening up means for the rest of the world. I think Japanese people are still going to be wearing masks and, obsessing about certain things that maybe are in the past at this point to a lot of people in the world. So if you want, the pre-pandemic experience of Japan, I think unfortunately some of that might just not be coming back for a number of years, or if ever. But you can get a visa, or you don't. If you don't need a visa, you don't need a visa, and you can go of your own volition and tour around Japan now. So if you want to go, it's possible again. Not necessarily saying it's the best time. I'd probably still wait a few months, probably at least 6 months, before doing anything like that. And I wouldn't go in winter or summer. But on to our main topic, Cyberpunk Edgerunners, a anime by Triggers funded by the game, but also
CDPR Red.
Right, but also by Netflix. It's had some heavy hitters in the sort of YouTube anime community talking about it. I think when Gaunt started speaking about it, it was the point where I was like, fine, I'll watch it. It's maybe worth talking about. On the other hand, I think Gaunt and Joey were basically sponsored to speak about it. And I know Joey was, because he actually appeared on the YouTube Netflix Japan channel and interviewed the director, the Trigger director of the show. I don't know if it's. I mean, I don't really follow them per se. Sometimes they pop up in my feed and I watch a thing that they do. But I know you watch their podcast, yes, right? You watch, what's it called, Trash Taste?
I do watch Trash Taste, yes.
Do they actually like it, or is it just like something they were?
They haven't really talked about Cyberpunk on Trash Taste yet.
See, that's sort of my impression, right? Is that just from the way they talked about it, wasn't necessarily something they were,
Gaunt loves
passionate
it, like
about?
crazy. Gaunt is crazy passionate about it.
Oh, okay, is he? Okay.
Yeah, he has brought it up on his Twitter.
Oh no, that's right. He was the one who had the praising video about it. Yes, okay.
Joey, as far as I'm aware, hasn't watched it, and Connor has said that he watched it, but he hasn't.
That's interesting because he was the guy that was interviewing the director. That's strange.
Mm-hmm. I'm not 100%.
Connor's opinion about anime is not necessarily something I'm concerned with. I'd rather watch him fall off a bike or something like that. I'm honest about what I watch Connor for.
Although
I quite enjoy when he fights with VTubers.
Yeah. No, that's what Connor's for. I don't know what else he's for. But it's.
I will say I basically don't watch anime reviewers anymore for the most part.
Yeah.
If I'm gonna watch an anime, I'd rather watch it first and then watch a review.
I believe that is. It's just more pleasant.
I feel like that's my philosophy on anything, to be honest. It's very difficult for me to take any reviewer in any context nowadays seriously.
So let's describe the anime before we talk about it. I don't know much about Cyberpunk, but I'll try my best. It's a kind of high-tech, low-income world. I think it's based off Neuromancer's kind of world from an 80s, which is a time when Japan looked like it was going to be one of like the dominant kind of forces in the world economically, even potentially like outpacing America.
Yeah.
So is it Gary Gibson? It's not Gary Gibson.
No, it's William Gibson.
William
Gibson? William Gibson wrote that book.
William Gibson.
Yeah. Anyway, someone Gibson, right?
Yes, it is a Gibson.
Wrote a book. It's kind of trippy.
William.
I wouldn't describe it as a fun read, but I like the first like few chapters, where it sort of has this kind of grungy, dirty Japanese version of New York, where all like the foreigners like exist, in like a Japanese kind of slum thing, and everything's sort of high tech, but it's all like hand me down high tech, like a Mos Eisley sort of area. Sorry, go on, Dom.
No. It's just agreeing with you. It's high tech, low lifestyle.
Yeah,
It's basically an extreme separation of the classes. You know, you're ultra rich, and then there's no middle class.
like
Everyone
there'll
else
be
is
someone
poor.
cooking on the sidewalk, with like, like a lithium ion kind of fusion stove, but they'll be homeless, right? That's
Yep.
the sort of the image of Cyberpunk I get.
So it's hyper-capitalism and slightly dystopian. Well, quite dystopian, honestly.
Yeah.
ultra dystopian.
I'd say ultra dystopian from my point of view anyway.
I don't know. I live in the current world. It feels kind of dystopian.
There's a lot to be said about this and sci-fi writers in general. But anyway, let's
Sure.
carry on.
Anyway, but so it's that America / Japan fusion society. That's what Cyberpunk is, I think.
Yes.
So you have Japanese lettering in American style cities, and one assumes there's like a disproportionate influence that Japanese companies and society has had on the world to produce this sort of weird mix of culture that's going on there. Which is why I probably it is overdue for this sort of anime adaptation. I mean, there have been cyberpunk anime before that are solely sort of from the mind of Japanese people. They don't feel anything like this. I think this was originally supposed to be a movie, a live action movie. It's you know who the author is? It's the guy that wrote The Witcher. That sort of surprised me, but I guess it makes sense.
Witcher Games, not the book.
Yeah, so Witcher Games, and it seems I think there were some of the books as well. I went through his wiki. I think he wrote some of the books. Anyway, Eastern European guy. It kind of feels like that sort of novel, like kind of like a Russian kind of bleak, miserable kind of view of the world. Except that this is like a colorful, characteristically cheerful Borderlands kind of view of the world in some ways. It doesn't keep the humor of Borderlands. It's a lot darker than that. Anyway, that's the world that this exists in.
Yeah, I mean that's a staple of the genre, is that it's neon and chrome, but with grime smeared over it. The neon and the chrome is basically just there as a thin veneer to hide the degradation of society.
Yes, yeah. I don't understand the world in this. I've never played the game. It's not really my sort of thing, but it seems like basically this is like the last city that humans sort of have that's inhabitable.
On this coast or in this area. It's one of the last bastions. And there are other cities, particularly Japan is one of the metropolises of this world.
Then. But they talked about some sort of like weird war that was like an AI fought war.
Arasaka and Militech fought against each other and basically destroyed the countryside.
I see. Okay.
And Arasaka and Militech are the two big forces in the background, like not directly, but in the background of this show.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it's also worth mentioning that prior to the PC game Cyberpunk, is it 2077, right?
2077.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the new version of the tabletop.
It was a role-playing game, and there are actually quite a few. The two most prominent are Cyberpunk and Shadowrun, and they're all derivative of especially William Gibson's works and then subsequent waves of the cyberpunk genre in terms of writing. So this is like multiple forms of iteration going back, feeding into one another, and stealing from one another, and eventually coming out with
This seems a
Sort
bit
of
darker
emergent
than
world.
like those sort of games, though.
Neuromancer. So
Yeah.
Mike Pondsmith, the author of the original Cyberpunk game and or world setting, he
Yes.
wrote a lot of books with regards to the world
Yeah, he
setting as
says
well.
this feels like his brain made into an anime.
So Mike Pondsmith actually hypercapitalized on Neuromancer. Not that he capitalized on Neuromancer per se, but he decided to transform that world a little bit more into the if you don't live on the edge, you're worthless scum. If you don't have value, the world throws you away. Kind of
Mm.
edginess, I want to say.
Which
And
is
then this world really feels like, sorry, rather, I should say, this anime really translates the feeling that Night City is your enemy.
yeah.
I just feel like the feeling that Night City is a carnivorous beast here to eat you up and spit you out is very prevalent in everything in this show.
Yeah. There's definitely that theme running through it because it's everything is a fight for survival in that genre, typically.
And death is so casual. When his mom dies, she's just
Yeah.
left to sit there on the road to
The
bleed out.
dehumanization of the lower classes, yeah. It's only a tragedy if you're rich.
And then when that guy's peeing off the shipping crate, how casually the other guy approached him with like to talk shit to him, and then how easily it came down to getting shot is just
Yeah.
life is treated as such a casually removable thing
Before
in the
we
show
go into like
everywhere.
any spoilers, let's just give a general rating, I guess.
Oh, okay,
So,
sure.
what do you would you recommend this, Yesh and Dylan?
Yeah.
I
To
would
someone
recommend.
who likes cyberpunk, the cyberpunk genre, I would definitely recommend it. To someone who really doesn't like it, I wouldn't.
Okay.
To anybody who watched any anime in the 80s and 90s, I would
Mm.
recommend it.
Yeah, agree.
Genuinely, this is the most 90s anime I've seen in a long time as well.
Agree. That's a good
It
way of
feels
putting
like
it.
a return to when anime was a little bit more niche and a little bit more artsy.
And also a little more violent as well.
Crazy violent, honestly. But Dylan, if you were to give this a rating, what would you give it?
So you guys know I don't like ratings, but
Mhm.
I'd be hesitant to stick by this rating unless I watched it again. Let me just preface this quickly. My feel is that it was a good anime. I don't know. I don't know if it was a great anime. I'd have to watch it again and really try and absorb it before I were to say that. And bear in mind, at the time that we're talking about this, it's 10 episodes currently, right? That's what it's sitting at now.
10 of 20, which is a bit weird.
Yeah, so they haven't released the next 10, and it could go south super quickly depending on what they do following this. It feels like the storyline has come to an end. So unless they start a new storyline somewhere else, they'd be looking for trouble, I think. Rating wise, at the moment, I would stick with a 7 out of 10, but that could change very easily upwards. I don't think it would change downwards, certainly, but it could change upwards if I rewatched it and maybe appreciated the visuals and the animation a bit better.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. Yesh, what's your sort of?
So I want to preface my rating by saying that not only have I been reading Mike Pondsmith's books with regarding to the setting, I've played at least 3 or 4 iterations of the game. I've played not Cyberpunk. I've played Shadowrun
Shadowrun.
in
Yeah.
multiple iterations. I think I'm a sci-fi person and a cynic, so this type of thing obviously would appeal to me more. As such, I do think my rating is perhaps higher than the actual quality of the thing. And also, I grew up watching anime from the 80s and 90s, and this harkens back super hardcore for me.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's an 8.5 out of 10.
Okay. Wow, that's some praise.
Mm.
I suppose that's me then. I'm not really sure where I sit on the entirety of it. I think Trigger did like a wonderful job. For me, Trigger stuff is really hit and miss. I think their animation quality is always excellent. Just thinking back to Kill the Kill in particular, animation quality outstanding. I think story was kind of a bit boring, right? Gurren Lagann, which we're not entirely sure if it was Trigger, but we think it was Trigger, right? That's the general.
It was done by the people who became Trigger. But
right?
They were at the time a different company. Yes.
Both a good story and excellent quality animation. I think some of the stuff I've seen in this, I wish you could see in other anime. I like that I like some of the stuff that's darker. I wish you could see like more kind of like swearing and a little bit more violence and things like that. In some animes, it feels like it would just add like a little bit of flavor to it.
Mm-hmm.
Having said that, I think they went like way too far with everything. To the point where it was kind of uncomfortable for me to watch most of the stuff that was happening most of the time. I'm not sure if it would have been better as like an hour movie, perhaps. I just felt over the course of like 10 episodes, some of them which was like randomly lengthed as well. It kind of it didn't have like the coherent kind of arc of a normal anime series or just a normal TV show. Some TV shows don't have those also, whatever. But I felt that there was a very clear like kind of good first half, and then everything after that point I just felt was a waste of my time, and to the point in the end where there was no characters left that I cared at all about. So I guess the first half I would say I give like a 6.5, and then I'd probably give like a 4 for an overall feeling of what I thought the series was.
It's
because by the end I didn't feel like I cared about anything that was happening on the screen.
Yeah.
Okay, so high and low, I guess. Mine is almost like half of what Yesh's is. Actually, it's less than half. Yeah.
I think that's it. I think if you're a fan of, are you a fan of Cyberpunk, Chris, or is it like me?
I have enjoyed playing those Shadowrun games with people, and I've read a lot of cyberpunky books and things, but I think I'm more of a fantasy guy.
Yeah,
and there's nothing. Yeah.
So yeah, I think if you're like a big fan of cyberpunk, it'll tend to hit there. But I suppose there's room in there for how it's done. The way they did it kind of speaks very heavily that they were trying to match it to gameplay, both of the PC games as well as the role-playing games, because the role-playing games, like, you do die in spectacular explosions of gore
but I wish there was more of that, right? That was one of my complaints towards the end, is all the death was just mundane, right? Okay. Except for the quote-unquote protagonist, who had like
his entire head explode.
Well, I mean, even then, it wasn't spectacular. He just kind of died being pathetic,
So, spoilers, by the way, for everyone.
Sorry. We're well and done. We're well and done. This is spoilers.
It's fine. It's fine. It's been out for a few weeks /
Indeed. Yeah. I'll put something on the screen when we come to spoilers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go on.
I do feel like this show did a lot of things right, though. Not only does the city feel like the actual enemy, it almost depersonalizes people attacking each other. Because even friends go against each other for a paycheck at certain points in this. And it doesn't feel like there's malice there. It just feels like that's the next logical step to take to go up.
Just to deconstruct that a bit, I think we're talking about the hacker character. I don't know what her name was. The one with no mouth. Evie? Kiwi.
Like the kiwi fruit.
Yeah. And sort of she has like a little moment of redemption, right, at the end, where she kind of...
Only because she got betrayed. Only because she got shot.
She says like but she says to herself like, why am I going back? Because she knows he's going to betray her. That's supposed to be like her like moment of like she's not that bad of a person, sort of thing, right?
Mm-hmm. But
would it be better if she just left? Wouldn't it? Like, wouldn't that be more interesting? If
because the whole point of the story,
a bad person.
The whole point of the story is that everybody tries too hard and it comes back to kill them.
Yeah.
If she survives, that proves that everyone else is an idiot.
And not only that, like financial ruin is the equivalent of death in that universe, right? And she hadn't been paid by that stage. And the way these work, everyone sort of invests stuff of their own individual accord, whether it's time, like the risk of your personal being, and money as well, into a run. And if you don't get paid at the end of the run, you may as well have died during the run. That's why they
But
push it to
also-
the max, full acceleration. And you either
gotta-
make it out, get rich, and survive another day. This is all about like that crime heist lifestyle.
That's why they're called Edgerunners, because they live on the edge. Is the point?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get
But
that. But you know,
for
just-
her in particular, she had been offered enough money to say "fuck you" to her friend,
yes.
Yeah.
but she hadn't been paid. She threw away her contacts. She threw away her reputation. She
Yep.
now has nothing if she doesn't get paid.
I understand, like, you know, if she thought she was going to get paid, if there was a remote possibility, but it was very clear just from the dialogue that she knew she was just going there to die.
Sure.
I don't know. I think she knew that there was something that might happen, but I think that she had no choice.
Yeah. I think
That's the
that-
whole point of Night City. You don't have a choice.
I think where I'm getting at, Chris, because what you're saying is correct, but what I'm getting at is there is no option to walk away. If you're left with nothing, you're not going to survive in that world. And so the only choice is to face that sort of 99.99%
I mean,
this is going to be betrayal,
You
and
s- you say that, right,
1% I will.
but there
make
is
my
one
way
character
through.
that literally just does walk away, right? The only survivor of.
Are you talking
any of
about
the characters.
Falco? He gets
No.
paid.
Who's Falco? I don't even know who
Falco's
Falco
the
is.
driver. He survives. He
talking about-
lives.
Lucy gets given basically all of the protagonist's money at the end. to
Right,
go to
and
the
just
moon.
walks away, right?
Yeah. But
So
the
two
point
people
is she
live.
gets paid.
So, like, why isn't that an option for everyone? This seems like a logical inconsistency.
Because no one
there.
was going to go and give Kiwi $250,000 to go to the moon. She didn't have a protagonist on her side. She only had herself.
Sure.
And
Seems
it
a
cost
weird reason
Lucy
to die.
everyone she knows. So
But like anyway, like I didn't care that Kiwi died, you know, because like she was kind of unlikable the whole way through.
Sure.
I kind of liked the Rebecca character.
everyone loves Rebecca.
But again, like after the midpoint, she just becomes like a murderous. Actually, like I watched the Japanese version. I don't know if you watched the dub, but like
I watched
her
the
voice,
Japanese
her
version.
voice changes as well. She goes from, you know, like punky to like thuggish in the way she speaks, and just becomes kind of less likable because of that. And then like the way she dies was just kind of disappointing given the way like her character kind of lived. She had this kind of over the top personality.
Yes.
And I thought, you know, just getting stomped in the head was disappointing. I would have liked her to have like a more like, I don't know, punkish death, right? Or
I
I
something
don't know.
like that.
Standing under a mech'd out super freak, jumping from the top of a skyscraper while firing your shotgun. Pretty fucking punk.
No, it's like being stepped on like an ant. You know, it's he.
But that's the point.
Yeah.
She
I-
is an
I-
ant to him.
Sure, I get that. That's what they were going for. I just, what is the point of it? It's not telling a story. It's just bug extermination.
No, it literally is telling a story. At the end of the day, they pushed too far. They went over the edge, and now is the fall.
Yeah, I would argue that it speaks to the genre. Maybe not classic like you know, narrative writing, right, itself, but it speaks to the genre in that life. You know, at any time there can be a minor slip up, and you can be a rock star as an edge runner, and just run into a wall in the most sort of banal kind of way, and that's the end of your story. And that goes back to, I think, the second episode where Lucy is talking to David, and she says, you know, this lifestyle, it's not about how you live, it's about how you die. And that's the whole point. Like,
They actually say it 3 times in the show, not the how you live, how you die thing, but they
Yeah.
bring up what's going to happen 3 times.
yeah,
The other one I remember very strongly is in episode 6 or 7, I can't remember. David goes to his Ripper Doc, who clearly does not give a fuck about him, and asks for a particularly strong type of drug. And the guy says, "You've got the shakes already, boy. It's not about if you go over the edge. It's about when you go over the edge. And as soon as you go over, you're going to go hard and everyone around you is going to go with you. You sure you want to do this? And you can really tell, like, this guy doesn't care about David, but he's telling him, this is a death sentence. There's no living. You don't have a choice.
I know.
You're dying.
It's not like I don't understand what they're trying to do, guys. It's just, what is the point
Well, no.
of the story?
My point is more that they do masterfully tell us what's going to happen, and still I was surprised.
Okay.
I didn't expect Maine and his girlfriend to go when they went. I didn't expect Hans Boy to go when he went. I was nervous and slightly tensioned through the entire show as I began to like Lucy and
So when I
Rebecca.
stopped expecting anything to happen was the moment the mother died, the way she died. That is basically when the world told you what it was and how much you should care for any character in it.
Yeah, but if you
'Cause-
don't care for the character, then you might as well not watch the show.
Yeah, I guess that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
What's the point of cheering for everyone who is going to lose?
Yeah, this is sort of where I will reinforce the previous statement about whether you like Cyberpunk, whether you should watch the show, or if you don't like Cyberpunk, you probably shouldn't. This is a very big staple of that dystopian genre, is the fact that life is so cheap, and that there's often not a narrative lesson to be learned. Like.
But see,
mom
like
does
the lesson,
that-
I don't care about a lesson or anything, but like fundamentally, a story should be about achieving something. And
They
if
did.
it achieves nothing, what did they achieve? They all just
Their
died.
names got written in the legends. They became Edgerunners.
Okay.
They marked the city. They actually attacked Arasaka properly,
It's sure.
and then they got used and crushed.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're doing the same thing as everyone else. So they're not standing out at all, basically, right? They didn't change like a way a corporation acts. They didn't bring down one. They killed some replaceable
Who
people,
does?
and they became replaceable.
When
But
you watch
that's-
Game of
but-
Thrones, right?
Well,
I'm
I
supposed to
get-
give a fuck about Game of Thrones. I'm told that's apparently a good story,
No,
right?
I mean, no,
but
it's
people
not.
die in that all the time and have accomplished basically nothing in that show.
Yeah, again, it's the same. The same problem with that show is that no one actually does anything. And
So you're saying Game of Thrones wasn't good?
certainly not the last season.
Okay, no. I'm talking about Game of Thrones. I'm not talking about seasons.
He's talking about the books.
I'm talking about everything. Game of Thrones.
I mean, having read the books, it's
So that's fantasy cyberpunk.
It seems, yeah, okay. Both those things really do seem just like a waste of my time, to be honest.
Right.
Whereas,
And yet, both of these are going to do extraordinarily well, even if the quality at the end of Game of Thrones crashed and burned.
well,
So there's a whole huge audience that really likes this shit.
no, I get that, and it makes me despair for the world, to be perfectly honest. That,
TikTok makes me despair for the world. This, I think, is a highlight.
but
So I
But you
find
know,
this
this to me is just sort of a reinforcing the fact that most people just sort of on some level crave destruction of themselves, and they're willing to cheer for that fulfillment of it, even if all they get is like a moment of kind of like a dopamine rush in the moment of their death. There's nothing. I mean, there's nothing good in this universe for sure.
yeah, it's not
speaking about
it's
the
not
show.
a pretty depiction of humanity.
There's no one I particularly cared for. In my view, I know Yesh is strongly disagreeing with this. No one achieves anything of note in this. In fact, everything that happens to the protagonist is kind of handed to them by another character. And even the choice you say he makes of, going over the edge is not really something that's in his control. He does it because of an emotional reaction he had, and then thereafter it's just a matter of time before he goes in a spectacular fashion, I guess. What they
He
did
set himself on
is
fire,
they made
yeah.
they made a huge mess, and it was visually interesting to watch that mess. Although I argue that like the way everyone should have gone should have been like basically a video game cutscene, of them going out in a spectacular fashion. Like the first scene we see of the first Cyber Psycho going out in the way he did. That was interesting. I liked the way that guy, went about ending himself. Every other death was just somewhat disappointing to me. So that's where I'm coming from, and I guess we feel very differently about it.
Yes.
That's okay though, right? Like,
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
I mean,
it's media. Everyone has opinions about it.
that's it. So I mean, I think, and I'm not trying to draw a direct parallel. I'm just this is more analogous, not parallel. But I generally speaking don't like some of the anime series that we've covered where it's eternal slice of life. Like these guys are never going to age, they're never going to change. There's no progression in the character, and I get it that this is more self-destructive than those are. That's everyday living, and it's good everyday living. Whereas this is a very dark. Life is cheap every day. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a bad story just because the characters don't bring Arasaka down to its knees. I think
no, I'm not saying that had to happen to them. I'm just saying, in the scheme of a story, I feel like there should be a goal that is achieved or failed. And this fails to even have a goal.
David wants to live his life and have friends.
That's not a goal, that's just living.
Yes, that's his goal. To have a life in the city, to wash your clothes in a washing machine in your own home.
No, yes.
Takes
a
effort.
goal is something like, going to the moon, which briefly he has as a goal.
I fully disagree with you. A goal is something that there is resistance to. As long as you have to go on a journey to accomplish the goal, that's a goal. Just having a life in the city is difficult and hard and requires effort. That's the point. He has a life. He has fun. He has friends. He actually builds himself up.
Yeah, I mean, it's also I think it's also quite interesting to have stories where you don't necessarily have a goal, but it's more of like an exploration of different human elements. Ugh.
Yeah, no,
God,
that's a sandbox at that point. You might as well just be playing Skyrim.
I see this to me is just, then it's more of a preference based thing than it is like the storytelling is good or bad. This just isn't for you, and that's okay. But yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
I feel like we should.
I think we should talk about it again in like 2 years and see if anyone remembers anything from this anime.
Be careful with that, because then I'll
No,
put a whole bunch of
I'm just
other
saying,
names on the list, and we'll go
the
back to
reason
that.
the reason things stick around in some of the shows you mentioned, and I understand you don't like them, but like your ReZeros and whatnot, is because there is a continuing line to follow of a story. And this has another 10 episodes coming out. What the fuck is it going to be?
Okay,
So Chris,
What the fuck's going to be about?
I have a question for you, right? You're
Yeah.
saying that a continuing line is helpful for making stories last. I watched Star Trek, you watched Star Trek. I know you like Star Trek, I know I like Star
love
Trek.
Star Trek,
What
yes.
was the continuing line in the original series TNG? Or even DS9, really?
Star Trek is about the philosophy of human improvement.
Right, so is this.
This is about the opposite of that.
Well, the world is against human improvement, but
No, this,
way,
this,
about a
is,
human
this is
level
about
in-
running
in
towards death and
Star Trek.
destruction. Star Trek is about improving everyone's lot in life.
There's always the next person to apply the same principle to.
What principles then?
The the standard Star Trek directive principles, prime directive, whether or not you follow it or not. I don't know. Like I
Yeah,
feel
no,
like
but
the
ultimately,
argument
like
achieving a
some of
goal-
the best Star Trek, not all of it is, but it's about some sort of moral problem and dealing with that. This
Yeah, but there's no
doesn't
through
really
line, there's
have
no
that.
goal.
This doesn't have anything deep to think about. It has kind of it's kind of a candy, like a toxic candy.
Yeah, okay. I can see where you're coming from, but I would argue that the kind of moral problems often even in Star Trek, and I know that I'm not as big of a Star Trek fanatic, but I would argue that those aren't particularly deep problems. They maybe go like 1, 2, 3 layers. No, I'm being serious. I'm not trying to fight you. I just
No,
like,
I personally agree with you on this.
like,
They explore different topics every episode.
you can only get so far down where until you reach a point of, okay, well, they're no longer layers. It's just a complicated problem, and any course of action that you pick is going to have some negative effect and some positive effect.
You're trying to make it like there has to be some sort of deep kind of thing, right? So
But
it's
the
just
point of what I'm saying
most
is
most things in life aren't particularly deep. Like Star Trek is just about trying to be good, generally. Well, up until a certain point, and then one stuff.
see, that's the problem.
True,
it's
right?
not always about that, but it's kind of sometimes about that.
No, but
My
the
point- my
original
point-
series, as well as all
Yeah,
the
but my point was you were
series.
saying that things are not memorable or particularly good without a goal. There's no goal in Trek. There's no throughput. No central line.
But there is. I mean, it's the exploration of the unknown. That's the continuing.
Okay. And
mission,
this is
right?
about enjoying life when the world is against you.
Yeah,
It's punk.
this just
Is it though? Okay.
It is. That's the whole show.
Yes,
It's about
it is.
making life happen when the world's against you.
Especially,
It
especially
feels
with
like there's no
societal-
joy in this world, and it's not somewhere I could exist in, or my mind could exist in, and be okay. Right.
Yeah, and
So,
yeah.
so I understand maybe that doesn't make it a bad story.
Mm-hmm.
It's just
I mean-
nothing I can put my mind to in this world is interesting to me for any amount of time.
100%, and I will fight for that being valid.
And so that's what I'm feeling, Yash. And
Yeah. No, I'm not arguing.
I understand that maybe that people, and maybe the majority of people don't feel that same way. But
Right. So I'm not arguing against you didn't find it interesting.
yeah,
I'm arguing against the point that you made, which was that you think that the people will forget about it in 2 years' time. It won't even last that long because there's no central conceit,
right.
which is true of a lot of other really great shows.
Can do you mind if I segue us completely, just
Sure.
quickly?
Okay.
Just to talk about something different that's associated with the series is the fact that this basically revived a dead game.
Yes, yeah. Playership
Um,
numbers.
This is like quite important from our perspective, I feel. Sorry, Yesh.
Sorry, Dylan, I interrupted.
No, go for it. Go for it.
Playership numbers are higher than when the game launched.
I mean,
That's it.
the game
And
actually
they're
works now,
lasting.
so that's not. maybe
Yeah.
Well, the
surprising.
problem is the game started working like the last patch for it before Edgerunners was literally like 8 months ago. So in those 8 months, those numbers didn't go up particularly. They had blips, but it wasn't huge. After Edgerunners, they got more players to come back than originally started playing the game,
Yeah, which
which is
big,
wild.
It's a big deal. So for those who don't know, like the way that game was released, there was hype for years upon years, right? Because we hadn't had a decent cyberpunk genre first person game that was extensive to that extent. Now that there are games that I can recommend that are almost on the indie side, right? They're not well known, but they're very good. They're just not this action packed, you're basically a runner vibe.
And also CDPR had some great relationship with the community, the gaming community. Because they have
did.
been doing really great work with the Witcher series, and their GOG
100%.
platform had been doing some pretty good stuff with regards to DRM and recovering old games.
And
So they
there's
had a huge wave of positivity.
yes, and massive excitement for it. And they just
Fallout 76 did.
the release of that game was tragic. There were so many bugs. It was really difficult to run. It came under so much criticism because the higher the pedestal that you put something on, the small minutia of how it doesn't meet that is going to be amplified, and it caused this thing to crash. And then for some reason, they managed to start producing this series and get other larger groups on board, Trigger, Netflix, and completely revived this game. How many years has it been out now? It's been out for
2 years.
2 years. 2 years post-release.
No, it must be longer.
More people are playing it now than during release. That is something that a series can do, and I think that's something that other game developers might look at in the future. You got also good examples with Arcane as well. Although
Arcane
I don't
was
quite think there's the same progression from viewer to player as there would be.
the
in
funniest
first.
thing is everyone who talks about Arcane immediately says afterwards, but this doesn't translate to LOL the game. Don't play LOL.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people who watch and love Arcane don't.
I mean, look,
really play LOL.
League of Legends and similar types of games are actually just a disease. you are better off not playing them. It's a way of wasting your life. It's like playing a clicker.
Yeah. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that before we think about closing things off, because it's quite an interesting facet of it to me.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I was actually shocked at the increase, but then they said that the retention is also great. 2 weeks after release, the player count is still gargantuan.
Well, they're not saddled with as many of the bug problems that they had during release, right? They've ironed out a lot of those kinks, and so there's smoother flow in that, and they've primed people in terms of what they should expect and how to build things, and they released a DLC to go with Edgerunners so that you can
The
play with
primary
your favorite
song,
shotgun or whatever.
the primary song from the anime, I really want to visit your home or something. I forget what the exact name is.
Is that the one from the moon scene?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
That same song is now in the radios in the video game. Rebecca's shotgun, Maine's gorilla arms, and some other weapons are in the game. And finally, Martinez's jacket is now in the game fully.
So there you go.
All right, well, that'll do it for our podcast this week. Thanks, guys, for talking about it.
Thank you.
And yeah, bye for now, everyone. Ciao, ciao.
Goodbye, everybody.
Ciao.